So tonight, we're here for an exploration of history, wisdom, inclusivity, and the exploration of the future of plant medicine and psychedelic spaces, an exploration of the colonialist legacies that we live out today in these spaces. And we are very lucky to be joined by this panel behind me of wisdom keepers, healing guides, connectors of people and communities, stewards, and this discussion is going to be sort of guided and moderated by Renee Chacon, who is a co-founder and executive director of Women from the Mountain, an Indigenous women-led nonprofit, and also cultural educator and an environmental justice advocate. And I'm just going to let Renee kind of take over at this point. And if you wouldn't mind just helping me give a very warm, big welcome to Renee, to Iskõn Rawa, Veronica Lightninghorse Perez, and Sabrina Frometa. Thank you.
Thank you. So before we start, to level us, to balance us, to support our need to clean and protect our spaces by the best of our capacity and the ability to connect to each other, I like to offer a prayer, and it's also just a grounding. I'm a firekeeper. I'm a woman that holds the smoke. I am Renee Chacon and Filipina, so I am Navajo, Chicana, and Filipina. And I am allowed to speak for certain palabras for my community, and been told by my elders that I am allowed to hold that palabra, especially in this space when it comes to preserving and protecting our way of life for Indigenous communities in the space. So, klaso kamati ometo, klaso kamati atatonati, klaso kamati tonantinglali, klaso kamati abuelitos y abuelitas, and all the ones that came before and all the little ones to come. I pray for all those going through difficult times. May they find the strength, the support, the compassion, the food, the water, and the justice that they need to make it through. My name is Renee Chacon. I am most of all a mom. My two boys are right there. I drag them to a lot of ceremonies and a lot of spaces, and they're kind of in training in some ways like that. And that's how I was raised. I was raised in the movement, as was my husband, and he'll introduce himself in a moment as well. I work for Working Families Party. I'm the Digicoms for the Southwest region for Working Families Party. I'm also on the Environmental Justice Action Task Force for CDPHE. We had to create an entire bill just to create my job, which actually addresses environmental racism in Commerce City, which is technically line 1 for Indigenous communities. It connects Canada through what is the port of Commerce City. Before it was Commerce City, it was Commerce Town. Before it was Commerce Town, it was Irondale. Before it was Irondale, it was Henderson, and Henderson is actually part of the KKK that colonized that space. This is the land of the Ute, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Shoshone, the Kiowa, the Lakota, the Comanche, the Dene, and 48 tribes that still live and travel through this space. I highlight that most of all because we are not monolithic. I am able to speak for my section of the community. My husband is a firekeeper. He is able to speak for his community, and that's actually why I brought him as well. He grew up in the AIM movement. His father was a sun dancer. He's also a doctorate in anthropology specifically for his tribe. And he grew up understanding exactly what it means to live in medicine ways. He grew up around medicine people, road people, and in fact, the tia that was supposed to come with me tonight gave him his first name traditionally, which we do not speak in these spaces. So it's that type of ceremony that we hold in those spaces and in those places to heal and clean our community, because honestly, that has always been, and it continues to be, our form of stable, cultural, trauma-sensitive healthcare. We have been erased from our own homelands. When we speak about medicines, this is legitimately a conversation of who are we accountable to? Who are we accountable to the medicine? Who are we accountable to our communities? Who are we accountable in ourselves? And who are going to be accountable to the future generations and looking at these as sources of life? So I kind of wanted to lay that platform because most of all of us are accountable to someone in our community. And when we're talking about the connectivity of medicines, especially living and breathing medicines, we are accountable to them too in the modern identity, no matter what your cultural background is. So I wanted to introduce that first as a prayer, and most of all, if something triggers you, please lean in. That is where the most cleaning and the most protecting needs to happen. I actually lit my fire so that if anybody feels triggered, you are more than welcome to come and put medicine in there, feed it to the fire. That's why we're fire keepers. We legitimately focus that energy where it can be the most useful, even if it's anger, even if it's hate, even if it's all those other things, because those are what we need to clean and protect most of all. So that's the type of fire keeper that I work. I work on state and federal policies, and even with now international policies, and understanding what does it look like for indigenous communities to help this self-determination. And I've been very privileged to, and if we need to, bring elders in this space who have been doing this for a really, really long time to protect our spaces. So,
my name is Beto Chacon. I was raised as a fire keeper around a lot of places, around a lot of people, and around a lot of medicine. My first offering was from the self and was in the form of blood and sweat when I was about 5 years old. And from there, I was raised to be a part of the ceremony and be a part of these medicines. So yeah, I'm just here to kind of share my perspective on that as one who was raised around it, kind of outside of the world of policy and the idea of substance abuse, and then to be more involved in this. In my Western identity, I am a Navy veteran who now works on inverters for solar panels, and so I put my energy towards trying to help where I can. You know, it was a path to come through and be in a Western world, and then also hold the respect for our earth and for our medicines. And I offer that to be able to give my perspective from both those sides and kind of what I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Beto. Snaps. Hello. I'm Sabrina. I guess a little bit about me. My mom's name is Ana Rita Ventura Artiles. My father's name is Calixto Frometa. We're from the island of Quisqueya, now known as the Dominican Republic, unfortunately. I come from a line of pirates and Arawak indigenous folks from the Caribbean, and so my indigeneity is super Black. So that's what I bring today, is all of that. I am part cacao farmer, part dancer, part recruiter, and friend of all things healing. So I'm at the intersections of this conversation, which is why I came. Thank you to Shoshana for the invitation, and Shannon, and all these people. Yeah, I'll speak up, I'm just tired.
Hello, I'm called Veronica Lightninghorse Perez. This is always my least favorite part of any time that I do this, because how do I introduce myself? I am so many different things to so many different people. I'm called medicine, I'm called mom, I'm called wife, I'm called healer, I'm called teacher, I'm called many, many different things. And for me, I'm just Veronica. This is just me trying to figure my shit out and learning as much as I can all of the time about other people's perspectives, other people's worlds, other people's cultures, learning respect for myself and for those around me, and trying to pass on what I've learned, especially what I've learned from failure and what I've learned from pain. And I've been through a lot of trauma in my life, a lot of different kinds of trauma. It was my training ground, is kind of what I consider it. And it's made me stronger. to be able to figure out and practice and try being the operative word most of the time, to turn that pain into power, to turn that pain into wisdom, to turn that pain into something useful that I can share. So I am here because this is where I am called to be. And I have learned in my life that when I am called to be somewhere and I show up, good things happen. And when I deny that call, I regret it, and I don't want to live this life. I got this suit and this life, and it's not been an easy one for quite a while, so I want to make it worth it. So I appreciate you all for having me. I appreciate your ears. I appreciate your openness, and I appreciate you caring about this enough to show up, because that's a big deal. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Iskõn Rawa. My birth name is Russell Takeall. For me, originally, I'm from the Bronx, New York, and I don't really perceive myself in terms of like title, even though, you know, technically I am an ayahuasquero of the Shipibo Honibo tribe. I'm also a Wachumero. What I'm most concerned with is, you know, my mission and my journey. Before I started this path, I had been a school teacher for 5 or 6 years, and for me, where the path is focused in the reclaiming, re-honoring, and restoring of cultures, I felt like within my own family lineage, just to see how much wisdom and history that my parents were able to pass down to me and my grandparents, even though they were sick, even though they were denied their culture. That's been the most important focal point for me on my journey. While I've worked with tribes in Peru, while I've worked in Nicaragua, it's always that bridge of like, I am retrieving my culture, I honor your culture, and I will learn your culture, and I will like adopt the ways of your culture. And that to me is like probably the most important part of my path, is that there's just a real need to understand that the medicines and the wisdom of not just like plant medicine and wisdom traditions, but any like wisdom we get in touch with, there's a language, there's a love, there's a culture and a context around it. And to learn how to perceive in that way, especially as an outsider, is probably the most important work. Because it's easy to take what we see from the outside and distort, you know, what it is that's happening in other people's culture. It's much harder to say, I will learn how to speak with your tongue before I force you to speak with my tongue. And that's, you know, all I have to say. And hope we have a good night.
Tlasokamati, thank you. I'm very grateful for all of you, for your lived experiences, for that mastery of the knowledge that you bring that Western identity often does not acknowledge as a form of education. But it is. It teaches emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. And that being said, I have 2 questions specifically for each of you. One of them is, who are you accountable to in your community? And how has that related back to medicine? The medicines that you use, psychedelics in this space, or any form of facilitating medicine. For me, even water. I've done whole water ceremonies for women specifically. Anything can actually, breath can be used actually in ceremony as medicines and can be just as healing. So that type of medicine is what I mean, is literally from the moment you wake up, what are your medicines? So who are you accountable to on the daily, the environment that you touch, everybody that you impact, and how have you used medicine in your experiences? And we'll go, is it cool if we go back this way? We'll go ebb and flow. We'll go this way, back and forth.
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who are you accountable to, and how do you use your medicines?
I'd say something like versus accountable, like what I'm in relationship with and what I am responsible for mastering and holding. First is my relationship to nature and the sun and the land, and every morning for the last like 3 or 4 years, rain, sleet, snow, shine, it does not matter. I always start with the flute and honoring the land that is around me, that is just absolutely transformative. And then I'm responsible for my community and the medicines that I carry, and making sure that I hold the candle of faith. I think my greatest responsibility and my motivating responsibility is that to my family, who I have not seen much while I'm on this path, but my like responsibility that I probably carry and hold highest is to heal African trauma. Like, I look at my younger cousins and I'm like, there's a good chance if I really bust my ass, you're not gonna have to go through this. And you know, every day I look at them and my grandparents on my altar, and I was like, I just have to keep, you know, going. I think for me sometimes, especially coming out of like a Western system, I think of an accountability as like a force, you know, sometimes, or a check, where for me at this point, I look at it as a real opportunity, because I am super cognizant of how many people died for me to hold this position. You know, that's just my reality, where I realize that I get to practice something that, especially because of the racism that still exists in these spaces, I get to practice something that there are just not a lot of black people, and there are not a lot of indigenous people, you know, in the sense of like ayahuasca or wachuma, who have been able to touch that medicine yet, because the first wave of people who were able to touch it was people from the West, and then they ended up shaping those spaces. So for me, it's about the opportunity and, you know, lighting the candle. And there's this one younger brother I have who's Mexican, and it took like 2.5 years for me to help him get where he needed to get, and my responsibility was to not give up on him. And so for me, it's like responsibility of like not giving up on my people, not giving up on the medicine, and making sure that I'm honoring the medicine in all of my actions. And then specifically, you know, the medicine I work with the most is tobacco, and just really making sure that I keep my connection to the medicine that's in my body, and I do the best that I can to greet people where they're at on their walk in life and on their road in life.
Beautifully said. Thank you.
That's a hard question. You know, there's so much accountability, and so much accountability that I'm not necessarily responsible for. You know, it's somebody else's judgment that's holding me accountable for something beyond my control. So to answer that, I guess first and foremost is myself. I hold myself accountable, that I am doing the absolute best that I possibly can at every given moment, and also meeting that with love, so I don't kill myself in the process, which I have run myself into the ground in the past. Also to Mother Earth, she's so wounded, and I connect with her every day, and I feel that, and I feel her cry. I also feel her strength. Spirit, for sure, because Spirit lets me know when I'm off the path, or I'm in my ego, or I'm not directing the trigger internally, I'm directing it externally. There is accountability in the clients that I see, because they're placing their trust for their healing in my hands, and as much as I tell them, you're responsible for the healing, I'm just a guide here, there's a level of trust. So anybody who gives me their trust, that's a high degree of responsibility and accountability. And I'm gonna make sure that I do everything I can to be deserving and worthy. Doesn't really fit. I'll own up to that. Be worthy of that, for lack of a better word. And then definitely my family. So much of what I do is not technically for this generation. You know, I have a deep understanding that this is generational work. You know, not everybody's going to appreciate this until a couple of generations from now. Even the undoing of racism and trauma and pain, all of this pain that we've endured, that a lot of it's still fresh, some of it's old, a lot of it's still fresh. But I want to make sure that when I pass on, when I leave this body and transition into the next, then I know that I have done absolutely everything that I could do with every breath that I had in my body. So, and how I use the medicine is, everybody has the different perspective of everything. I've discovered that there is no one truth. This is for me. You might disagree, but I have discovered there's no one truth. Each and every one of you has a different truth. And there needs to be the honoring of the individual truth. There needs to be the honoring of the opportunity to grow and to meet the medicine where the medicine's at. To not just go for one medicine. There are so many different medicines. I love Renee said the breath. That is the #1 medicine. That is your life. That is your force. You can have a psychedelic journey just on breath work alone. Calming, grounding, amplifying energy. All of these things is breath alone. So recognizing that words can be medicine. Plant medicine is medicine. All used in different ways, but even this wonderful chamomile lavender for the nerves here, this is medicine. And I say thank you as I bring that in. And as much as we can be, my belief again, as much as we can be in gratitude to whatever or whoever we are using as medicine, I think that's what grounds us and brings us in and keeps us accountable.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, I'm like thinking, every time every turn came, I was like, think, stop listening. Prepare something. No, I think, yeah, I agree with you, with both of y'all. I think that I'm accountable to myself, first and foremost. I'm accountable to every connection that I make, and I take them quite seriously while I'm so playful with them. Every person that I meet and touch, work with, build with, I'm accountable to that. So in making a connection or a new relationship, that's a fucking new accountability partner, you know? So it's about to be a lot of that in this room. And I think if we move like that, then it sort of feels more manageable and small and intimate and doable on the day-to-day. But yeah, like y'all, yeah, I'm accountable to my family. I started doing psychedelics. I was like, I need to save my family. Point blank. I'm like, I'm the only scrappy, punchy bitch that's gonna do this. You know, I'm first, I'm getting there, we're here, I'm up. I'm first generation American, and so there's a lot of conditioning that happens of like, don't do drugs, like be a lawyer, be all these fucked up weird things. Shout out to the lawyers. And, you know, I think my older brothers really, you know, to survive this place, this country, as Black men who aren't from here and didn't know the language, they did the right thing. I did the wrong thing and explored things. So yeah, but in that exploration, I got and have been healing my family bit by bit, the babies, the elders, and that's a big thing that I carry with me, and in the work that I do is just the intergenerational shit of it all, and feeling like that, as you mentioned, Veronica, like this is a long game for me. It seems like for a lot of us. So there's still a deep sense of urgency because I'm here right now in the flesh. But yeah, my commitment is like really big and epic, and I'm really honored that my family has taken me seriously. has done ceremony with me. It's just so beautiful. I could cry about it. That wasn't supposed to be what happened, right? We were supposed to come to this country, forget that shit, throw it away. And we didn't do that. So we're a success story, and that's what I'm accountable to. And then, yeah, the medicine is medicine. Everything is medicine. When you said water, I was like, that's what we do in my country, you know? It's just like, it's water baths. Like, you're dirty, you know what I mean? Like, go into the ocean. My mom literally told my oldest brother, before you step into my house, go do an ocean bath. He's like, but that's so inconvenient. I have to like get a taxi to the beach and just pick me up at the airport. She goes, I don't know what to tell you. I'm accountable to that. So thank you.
I think first I would say my accountability is to my children and the rest of the people who are going to have to live in my stink, right? Maybe if some of our other generations thought, hey, we leave a big stink, maybe we should stop that. But that one kind of being the basic, like that drive to survive and help my family and my community survive, and therefore looking out for a future generation. That feels simple, you know. That's that basic prayer that got thrown out at every circle when we started the fire. So, you know, there's that. But I think the one that takes a little bit of thought and sometimes more humility than we're ready for, right, is the accountability towards our elders and what we learned from them. Because I know, right, a lot of us didn't like learning the way that they taught us. You know, it was hard. Hold on, I'm gonna get my shit together here in a second.
We have two elders past One of them raised him. Capitan Raul Chavez. Capitan.
And so, in that light, my experience with medicine and the way that I use medicine is based on that accountability to my elders. Because I have to remember what I learned, and they don't always tell you, you know. Some of them will tell you, some of them will tell you directly, but usually they won't. And you'll be sitting there and like, hey, what's this and what's that and what's this and what's that, and they'll give you a bunch of really confusing answers. Because it's offensive to your emotion of spirit to try to make it words, right? I wish I knew more languages better than I knew English, or Spanish for that matter. I know both of those languages, right? But I can't speak the ones that were genocided out of me. And so that's one of the feelings that we have now is, where's your accountability? It's like, I had to be ungenocided. That's me. My grandparents don't know their medicine, or didn't know their medicine. My parents went out to look for it, and then when I was born, I got to be born into it. And having that accountability to say, hey, you taught me how that medicine is to be respected and how that fireplace is to be taken. So when I say that I'm a firekeeper, like we as a family are firekeepers, it's because taking care of that fire is our position that we were given from our ancestors when they pulled us out of genocide. They said, don't forget and don't be Christian. Talk about it. You know? And so okay, great. So how do we take care of it? And it's like, remember, they're people. The medicine is people. It starts out as people. The hikuli, they're people, and they're very fragile people. And if they're not around the correct other plant people, and they're not living in the right home, they will die. Or, like so many of us have experienced, they will stop being the people that they are. And then that's not the medicine, right? That's where we get into what Western medicine has done to whatever. Opiates are unrecognizable as whatever medicine they used to be, right? Because they're just a pill that Big Brother can sell you. So when I say medicine, it's not a drug, it's a life form. It is no different than the cow that we raise to eat, right? And that it is a person that has a life, and we should respect it for what it's giving to us. And that's how I use our medicine, is that I cultivate it and I think about its life. And before I go to say, I'm gonna go use peyote, ugh, I hate that word. Before I say I'm gonna go use, I say, you know, is it taken care of? Are the plants in my home taken care of? Is the life there? And so preserving life is what medicine is for, and therefore that's how I've learned, and through the discipline that my elders taught me, I take care of that medicine with a kind of procedure.
Fiercely beautiful, each of you. Thank you. I'm accountable to myself. I'm accountable to my children. And I've been raised to be privileged in my cultural identity that it was 3 circles you're accountable to. You're accountable to your connection to Creator, to family, and then community. And I've been raised that way ever since. You need to connect with Creator and be accountable to yourself first. You need to know your weaknesses just as much as your strengths. So I'm accountable to knowing where I fail. I need to know my boundaries. I'm accountable to that. I'm accountable to the next 7 generations. I've been taught that all my life. We've been taught that all our lives. You are accountable to the next 7 generations. They call it restorative justice now. Before that, a name, it was called many other things, but you have no choice. But to the best of your ability, think about what you're going to be doing for the next 7 generations, how you impact. And other cultural identities too hold that very sacred as well. For medicines, my family was a relocation family here. My family is from Pueblo Pintado, and we were of a specific clan that, again, was also impacted by the longest walk of the Navajo, which they actually, Kit Carson is responsible for that here. And they survived that. My grandmother was also a child bride. She was born into a Mexican Dene clan. They actually stole her child, and she ended up moving here to Denver. At an 8th grade education she was able to hold here in Denver. Before it was El Chapultepec, she actually owned that building too. And then she had 2 restaurant and a shoe shop off of Stout. So I grew up here. My mother grew up here on the east side. I grew up on the west side specifically. I'm accountable to my community. I have almost died several times. I have seen my own siblings. I've buried them before the age of 30. I have buried more than half of my family. I need to be accountable to my community. My community needs me in many different ways. And now that, yes, 2 of our elders have passed, we've been actually asked to hold now in a really big way some of our own cultural traditions, because if we don't do them, it will not be done at all. Certain ceremonies, certain things that we do, we actually have to teach our children certain cultural traditions because it's not supported. And we actually get congressional funding now because even Congress knows that our cultural education is no longer even taught anymore in certain aspects. So we have no choice but to be responsible and accountable to our community to some degree. And it's a bit overwhelming because at the same time, we're having to live in the modern identity. We don't even have a space to pray. We have Talbot, which is in Sedona, which is about an hour south from here. And then sometimes we have places in Boulder. But we legitimately have to find for every single ceremony, which is almost monthly, a space for 30+ people to come and pray all night and then do danza for about a day or so the next day, which is an entire ceremony. It's an entire weekend. And you're accommodating for food, which is part of the ceremony. You're accommodating for whoever actually needs healing at those ceremonies. You're accountable to legitimately your community. Whether they're in substance abuse, whether they're houseless relatives, different aspects of your community. And a lot of that, I've realized it is not all for one person. It is not legitimately for one person. I've seen more of our women and men overwhelmed by not having the support and capacity right now because they still have to go to jobs. In fact, the reason that the Capitan actually recently passed away, he actually went to a ceremony, went for a surgery on his shoulder, and then went to a ceremony to go support another elder that has passed away, and he passed away in that process of giving so much to community. That's beyond a human's capacity. We need allies and accomplices now. We legitimately need people to understand that we're holding whole cultural identities anymore just for our future generations to survive. And a lot of it has restorative, profound ways for justice now that could heal. And we're even having to fight on an international level for specifically even cells or genomes to do what normal indigenous knowledge does. We actually work right now at Geoversity in Panama, which is one of the few countries that with their political system works on another level of including indigenous knowledge for the air particulate pollutants, for the water particulate pollutants, how to pull it from there, and then also socioeconomically, how do these become sectors? How do these become jobs? How do these become trades? For communities that the system is not broken, it is working as designed to target. So that kind of brings me to my next part, where we find ourselves in politics. I don't know about y'all, but last week I was devastated. I'm a mother with children that goes to elementary schools. I don't think I need to mention anything else more. I am terrified sending my kids to school, just to go to school. And they're still taught Kit Carson. I still have to even go to their school sometimes and teach their school about Kit Carson and Evans. He's responsible for the Sand Creek Massacre here in Colorado. So it's these type of dynamics that in the modern identity, the best way that we've ever been able to describe is we are a disproportionately impacted community, and these are cumulative impacts on our community. So in political spaces, this is how we appeal for simple equity analysis just to exist in our spaces, to have equal access to healthcare, equal access to housing. I don't know if y'all live in Colorado for a while, but housing is ridiculous now, and it shouldn't be. And also equal access to food justice and to specifically our medicines. The copal that I'm using, I can only get once a year, honestly, because it's another medicine that is over-harvested. Same thing with the sage, same thing happening with the sweetgrass. That's why water and breath medicines are actually another form of ceremony at this point. It's legitimately just to balance so that we don't overconsume our own medicines, to heal our own communities, because so many are reconnecting to their indigeneity again. But we're still all taught certain forms of predatory behaviors. And that's kind of where I want to ask this next space, is where do you find yourself now when it comes to the modern identity of politics, the modern identity of your medicines, having to combat predatory behaviors and having to show others this is real colonization right now still working. This is real colonization for me to educate you that I still exist. What does it look like to be able to bring that into political realms and start actually fighting for equity if you've been in those spaces? That's a pretty loaded question, so I'll go back that way. I know you've worked in it a lot.
I think my answer is a little bit short, so it'll be all right. And that's just because part of my experience with medicine and ceremony and all that has been just separated from politics. It was like pretty much standard among all the people that I went to ceremony with, just stayed away from politics and no. And that was like, it was in the same line of advice as don't talk to police, you know, you don't talk to them because there's nothing good that can come out of that, right? But so you don't get involved in politics because what we do is not going to be observed, right? We're not gonna see a political benefit. We're gonna go tell people, hey, let us pray, you know? And for the most part, nobody's gonna know that it's illegal for us to pray, right? We don't even know it most of the time. You know, when I was that little kid in the back of the room, just trying to be there, I'm not illegal. I'm just kind of here, you know? I'm learning how to tend fire. I'm learning how to take care of medicines. It is what it is. So it's weird to see it now in a political framework. I'm used to the idea of just hiding from politics, hide from all that stuff. And I think, that being said, I really appreciate the work that I see other people in my community doing to say, hey, no, we kind of have to say something political, because otherwise you won't be able to exist. You won't be able to keep on existing, because there'll be no one to fight for you, and you'll just be left to disappear. So I appreciate all that political fighting, and the kind of getting in the face of people and reminding people, hey, our sources of life and sources of medicine have to be protected somewhat.
Mine will also be short because I'm not a political person, but shout out to y'all. I love y'all. I was just gonna say, yeah, I've been a fucking predator. Like, I've done that. I went back to my farm in DR, sat my 70-year-old dad down. I was like, Dad, wouldn't it be cool if we just like did just fucking, what is it called when you just like farm the same thing? Yeah, what if we just do all cacao and just get mad money, you know, and solve the problems, because there are real problems, you know? Like, we could use the money. And again, back to the first question, who are we accountable to? Because I'm accountable to him, I had to sit the fuck down when he said to me and said, are you crazy? Are you crazy? Very calm, you know how they do it. Are you crazy? And then he said, we're gonna continue to do cacao on that little part of the hill, guandules on the top, yuca on the side. And that's it. Because this is not a Godiva. He said, actually, we're not gonna sell a Godiva. We're selling to Black and brown people who need it for ceremony. I said, Dad, again, the power of the medicine and being accountable and shutting the fuck down and up and sitting and listening to the people that have been holding this land and this knowledge and this wisdom. And very quickly, within seconds, I was like, you're totally right. I pay taxes. That's my issue, you know what I mean? I gotta pay taxes, I'm in America, I hate this place, I love it, I'm accountable to it now because y'all brought me here. I'm fucked up, and I have to do a constant unlearning to not be a predator to my own shit, to my own people, to my own water. So, in terms of that, yeah, like you could be of this land, of this stuff, and still be a predator, you know what I mean? So, shout out to dads.
Politics, man. Jesus.
Right?
I'm of two minds of this, in all honesty. About 14 years ago, I survived death. I had the choice to come back. I chose to come back because of what the Spirit showed me would happen if I didn't, and I had 3 little kids at that time. And I came back pissed that I had to come back to this shit. And people arguing and forcing their beliefs down somebody else's throat, and then being pissed off they don't believe what I believe, and I don't believe what you believe, and you're wrong and I'm right and you're wrong. My God, it was hard. But finally being able to let that go and start to get back to the beauty of this place, the opportunities of this place, of this earth, of this land, of these people, allowed me to open up, because for years I wouldn't talk politics. If somebody started talking politics, I would turn around and leave because I didn't like what it did to people. And now I'm in it. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating because in order to be able to communicate with this rich, colonized white guy, I have to be able to step into his world. I have to be able to adopt his model of the world so I can know how to talk to him, so I can get him to see a different perspective. That is hella challenging, and sometimes it feels downright dirty, because it's like, my God, you think like this? No, Veronica, you can't be judging. Can't be judging. You don't know. Who gave you the right to be judging? But it's so wrong, my God. Don't be judging, Veronica, don't be judging. All right. So I do what I can. I see what I see, and I do my best that when I get triggered by it, I go inside and ask me, why does it trigger me? Why does injustice piss me off so bad? Because it's all personal. It's all my filters. It's all my perspective. It's all my understandings and my judgments. So I gotta go inside to find
the truth of the trigger. Because we're supposed to be the rainbow tribe, y'all. We're supposed to be accepting and understanding of each other. And like it or not, politics is the game of power. So who's got the power that's gonna stand up and say, hey, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget where I came from. Don't forget where your wisdom peepers came from and why they're still able to hold that wisdom. Remember how we got here, and not through the lens of pain and blame, but through the lens of understanding. Let me ask you this question. Who in here believes everything happens for a reason? That's a hard one. So what are we going to learn? And then what are we going to teach from what we learned? Did we learn that we can group together and create a united voice and create change? Did we learn that our votes don't matter, so why bother? Did we learn that nobody's going to listen to us, so don't try? Or are we going to stand up and say something? Are we going to step into the model of the world of these people that we don't agree with, that we don't like, so we can figure out how to communicate with them so we can get them to move? Because there has to be movement, or we're just going to keep playing the same old record over and over again. Dismiss it if it doesn't apply. I'm speaking to what I know to be true. If it resonates, keep it. Otherwise, delete it. Thank you.
I'd like to recenter back to you, please, to where we find ourselves having to address real trauma in political spaces, generational trauma in political spaces, and hold that representation with grace.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with going back to the word accountability, because it's not, a lot of my life is perceived through my emotions. When I think of accountability, it's like I've been trained by the whip, so I know what it's like to answer. And so for me, I'd start before even getting like the political landscape. In my career as a teacher, I fought and I broke systems. You know, so I guess for me, like, politically, it just, a lot of it comes down to what you choose, where even, I guess when we talk about plant medicine work, there has to be some sort of balance politically, where with any medicine that you're using, it has to be balanced by like an elder or a knowledge source and like a lot of integration. Like without, I just really want to start there, because a lot of times I don't see any cultural root to the work, and that's where politics begin, where even, you know, that brother coming up in here speaking, that's the community life I grew up in. That's the container that the kids I taught, all that was shoved into them. They never got to express that. And so I guess for me, it's like really important to think about like what choices it is that you are making. How I describe the culture that we are in is the control paradigm and the dominator paradigm, where even, because I do not really believe in the term of people of color or indigenous, these are the labels and names that, you know, we move with. What I feel like the first thing that has to be known is, because of this cultural container that we are in, all of us have been distorted, not just people of color. All of us walk around with illusions. All of us walk around with unconscious bias. And that bias is usually unfounded, and we don't speak on it. It happens automatically. Automatically, we believe something about someone who's black. Automatically, we believe something about someone who's queer. Automatically, we believe something about someone we've never engaged. And we have especially in the West, the cultural bias is so high. We have an idea that other people are supposed to behave in a way that suits our sensibility. A lot of that probably comes out of church and a lot of the other forms of domestication that we receive in this society, but none of us are going to make it if you can't challenge your own domestication, and that's your own work. That has nothing to do with anybody on stage. The programming you received is the programming that you're responsible for unprogramming. Just like I'm responsible for my unprogramming. And if you're not doing the deprogramming work around the medicine, you become a threat to other people. Because no one knows when you're going to trip over a trigger and unconsciously engage your violence. And that's a lot of what I navigate in my own work. A lot of the people I'm journeying with are Westerners. And all of those Westerners, in one way or another, enslaved my people. So that's exactly what we're seeing in the medicine, which is I want to teach everyone what to do, which seems noble and good, but really I want to teach everyone what to do means I don't want to engage my past, and I don't want to look at what I need to look at, because I know that black people and brown people don't need to be taught, they need space. You can't be taught what you've lived through. It doesn't work that way. And you know, that goes the same for anyone else who's navigating an experience coming out of an oppressed background. Who is going to teach me what it is like to be beat by the Denver police? Who is going to teach me what it is like to be beat by the NYPD? Who is going to teach me what it's like to do that in a public school system? And so even when we think about like cultural landscapes and a lot of the literature that's out here that I really recommend you question, especially from an African perspective, everyone up on stage, even though I am not like close to these people culturally to a certain extent, we have all different visions of what we see based on the lineages that we come out of. None of the Western work speaks to that. A lot of my psychedelic journeys are African. They're speaking to my enslavement and my work. And then a lot of the way the work is framed in this contemporary context is that we're all experiencing the same thing. And so like when I have anger like that brother, because I do, and I've really moved down my path, now I'm working with someone who's not even acknowledging it because it offends their sensibility. Yeah, it's a lot of different emotional games that can be played if you don't have emotional intelligence. The like closeness I feel with people who like identify quote unquote as people of color, like I build there, and that's something to learn, and that's something to grow, and we can move together. But I do not assume, because there's so much more we have to learn about each other. And often we're not given that time to do so because we're consistently in a state of duress. And that's what happened when I was a teacher, where like I had so many kids and their trauma was breaking open, and I had, you know, staff above me who realized if all this were to come out and the whole jig were to be up and everyone would have to deal with their racism, that model would fall apart, especially for the kids who had been abused within the system. And so I think it's like important to figure out politically where you locate yourself and why, and to like really challenge your belief system. Even in my, you know, challenges in being detained by U.S. Custom and Border Protection, ironically by people who all look just like us, and that's right, and that's the reality, because a lot of the work is getting people like us to do the dirty work for the system, because that's how they broke us up in the first place. It's so important to like develop a cultural context and a cultural milieu. There's this idea sometimes I feel like that like white people don't have culture or whatever. That's not true. There has to be investigation, and there has to be a connecting back to your roots and what they are, and finding significance and bonding with other people. Because to me, I see that as the greatest impediment to the work, you know, politically. It's hard to advocate for people you know nothing about, because then it just becomes charitable, where it's like, well, I've done my part, and it's like, oh, okay, like you've done your part. It's like, here I am, the whip is still on my back. It's like, okay, you've done your part this afternoon. And I have seen this in my work with a lot of Western facilitators where one of the greatest political distortions is a lot of indigenous people in the context that I work in have to depend on English or Spanish translation. Now that my Shipibo is better and my Spanish is better, I can see the distortion in the translation, because even though I don't speak the language, I came out of a similar cultural milieu that has the same values. So I know what happens when someone distorts it when they're not out of that milieu, thinking they're doing they're thinking they're doing the indigenous person a favor, because that's their cultural bias. There isn't a lot of training around cultural bias, and there isn't a lot of training around unconscious bias, and we all have it. But in order for the work to like really advance, that's something that has to be investigated on your own time. Everyone has a program. And these programs are designed, some of which, to destroy us from the inside out, especially when we disassociate from people who have challenges and have conditions that don't resonate with our sensibility. And that's reflected all over the city. Before there were mental asylums, before that, you know, those people were the first people who were killed or whatever. And the reality is that that anger that was expressed, it really is inside all of us. Whether we choose to recognize it or not, whether we choose to subdue it, whether we choose to project it on other people, whether we put on a uniform and beat up black and brown kids every afternoon and then go home and say, I had a good day at work, I held up the banner for justice. Like, it's such, you know, a reality, you know, to really think about these things. And that to me is what I feel when I think about politics. You know, like, all these medicines are sacred, but there are so many different gatekeepers, and we have to really work on this system where a lot of the laws that were written at a time when maybe 90% of the people in this country today could not participate in democracy. That's just the reality, especially a lot of the homeland security laws, where, you know, like, I think it's from like 100 miles on each coast, and I just learned this when I was detained by CBP. Like, U.S. Customs and Border Protection has all sorts of rights and responsibilities, and they don't have to report anything. And that is just the reality. And so, like, if it is for people to be able to practice a different culture and a different way of life, the reciprocity needs to be upped. It just has to be. And I don't blame anyone or I don't shame anyone, but everyone is responsible for undoing their domestication. Everyone is responsible for undoing their domestication. And undoing your domestication is hard work, because you'll have to give up the entitlements and the privileges that come with your domestication.
And it's scary.
Because you're going to be a whole new person in a whole new world. And you know, I can quickly give an example of that because I feel like I'm long-winded. A lot of how that shows up for me is telling older people in my family that we're not going to beat children anymore. And we're just not going to do that anymore. And it's a lot of defenses, we're going to do it, and then here comes that violent anger that, you know, I have to deal with, but it's important to me. And I think we all have an issue emotionally that we resonate with, where there is a wound, where we need to start speaking about why it is a wound and why it needs to, you know, stop.
Equity is not charity. Thank you so much for all that you mentioned. That's exactly even why my communities exist. I come from indigenous communities that we were politicized. We were legitimately, as in, just to exist in Denver, we had to establish our own self-determination in urban spaces as indigenous communities still living here before it was a state. We had to identify ourselves constantly and then have to constantly work with other spaces like law enforcement. I work with missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. We don't work with law enforcement. We legitimately just have to re-educate even law enforcement and institutions that they still target us. For missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, that starts in data, literally in data in and of itself. The elders will say, oh yeah, we go missing from our tribes, but we die white or Latino on their statistics. And that's exactly what it is. We're erased constantly because we're no longer even seen as here at all. So our communities are constantly politicized. I've had no choice but to be stuck in political realms that I honestly wish I could work myself out of a job because I'm doing the exact same thing my mother and grandmother did. And it's actually shameful, especially for the state of Colorado, and I'll say for what it is. And it's because they lack that, they have that incompetence of cultural and trauma sensitivity to our communities, and what does that look like for equity? And we work on so many things of what you've mentioned too, specifically of just having safe and brave spaces for our own communities to heal from these consistent forms of colonialism. That's all I'm even asking for, just for us to pray, then for us to be educated, then for us to mitigate what is going on in particulate pollutants and environmental racism, and then hopefully regulate and protect it. And that's a whole lot in political realms that we're lucky if we're even able to get into in one lifetime. So it just shows you how long the actual political system really takes. And by this point, we need accomplices. We know where the allies are, where people are willing and ready to, when you come to this space alone, you're not white. You cannot identify as white. You come from another cultural identity. It could be Dutch, it could be Russian, it could be Portuguese, it can be so many other beautiful indigenous backgrounds. That is not white, because the minute that you erase your identity, you erase mine a whole lot easier, and you dehumanize my communities a whole lot easier in the political spaces by those projections. So we specifically go, those that have privilege, are you ready to relinquish it? That's why I said, by all means, if something triggers you, maybe that's where you need to relinquish your privilege. Maybe that's where you're noticing. If it's money, that's a power dynamic, because I get this a lot too, even from my own communities. Oh, well, you're only going after their money. Yes, I am going after your money and land back. You know why? Because money is a power dynamic in our communities. And for our communities specifically, especially when we talked about medicines in and of themselves, I'm not trying to go after it for the money. I'm going for the wealth building and hopefully cleaning what that money really does through our deeds, through what we're doing every day and healing our communities through cultural education. And then ultimately, yes, land back, but not to give land back to me, to give land back to itself, recognizing on a political space rights of nature. And then finally, that brings us to psychedelics. And this is where I would really like to get into the nitty-gritty. Psychedelics is not the first time that it's come. I was told this by my elders recently. There was, I believe it was in the 60s, they were called shaman approach, that had proposed legislation at that time, actually specifically, to have sweeping legislation of including peyote and mescaline. So this is not even the first fight in understanding, not fight, but recognition of equity of protecting our living medicines when it comes to legislation. They won them specifically because no treaty has ever been honored. That's why I said my communities have always been politicized. We legitimately live in a space that none of the treaties we've ever signed, no recognition of rights of nature have ever been acknowledged. The least that they could do was provide us federal protections on the reservations that they gave us. And that's what they did in a lot of the spaces. They recognize that, you know what, we've harmed you so much for your future generations, the least we can do is give you access to your form of cultural education, spiritual education, some type of access to healthcare equity. And that's what's still maintained even now throughout the decades. I work specifically with elders that the best they do is just protect their way of life. They cannot go after every pharmaceutical company. They cannot go after every single space that they do. But what they make it a point to do is politically, spiritually, legislatively, every focus that you could put is protect their way of life. So for this panel specifically, how, when you see the new psychedelic scene coming up, would you like in the modern identity to protect your way of life? because that might actually go back to, again, protecting our biosphere, protecting our communities, protecting our future generations. How would you like that seen in the new psychedelic front that's coming up now that might not be respecting it with that cultural and trauma sensitivity? And we went this way, so I think I'm gonna go by that way.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Sorry, going this way again. How would you like to see protections for the new psychedelic scene, and what are you seeing with the resurgence of this generation scene of it?
I think what I've seen a lot of is that I just woke up face, and and what that means to someone like me is that, like, in the ceremony, you stay up all night. You're just awake and you're there. And part of the medicine is that you're up all night and you're there praying with the medicine. You might have eaten it. It might have been part of the tea. It might have been turned into a salve and rubbed on parts of your body or something. I don't know, maybe you got a blood clot or something. Well, we would do that kind of stuff, and then in the morning you saw the people who just woke up, and they had fallen asleep at some point, and maybe they did the really bad thing and they ate medicine and then fell asleep, because you're not supposed to do that, right? And what I mean by that is you have that face like, oh, I just woke up. I am now aware of what's going on around, but I didn't do what I was supposed to see what everybody else sees right now. Because when you're in that dawn after you've been up all night, your mind is still in between the spirit world and your world, and your mind is there to hear the air, right? You're there to feel the songs that the birds are singing. You're there to feel that light upon your face from that morning sun, and it's all going to be weird. And it's all you're gonna see things that you don't normally see, and you're not gonna be able to describe them later anyway. And when you do that with the discipline that I was taught, you sit there and you can focus on the fire and stuff. But when you wake up and you just woke up, you don't see that. You see everybody else around you seeing it, and then you act like you've seen it, and then you act like you've been there. and you haven't. And I see today this. Well, really, I've seen it. I'm sorry. I'll take that back. I don't believe in that part. The these days kind of talk sounds like bull to me, you know, because it's been like that every day, and every generation has said that same stupid thing. So it's everybody's always like that, right? We have to teach each other to navigate, you know, with a little bit of discipline. Otherwise, we'll just forget. So I see that if you don't know, you have to be honest with yourself that you don't know. I don't know anything about psychedelic mushroom prayers. I'm sure they're there. I know that the mushroom people are probably the hardest people on this planet, and you know, when we're gone, they'll be fine. You know, so I'm not worried about anybody doing anything wrong to the mushroom people. I don't think we're capable of that anyway. But our other medicine people, you know, even our food, right? Corn, the corn that gets monocropped out there, that's no longer medicine. There's no medicine there. There's no value. That's sugar and gas. You know, no. You have to treat each thing as the person that it's supposed to, and I see that respect doesn't exist as a whole usually. Usually, even the ceremonial spaces, I'll see my family who I'm used to see. I'll see my other family that I'm also used to seeing. And then every once in a while I'll get people there and be like, oh, we're gonna do some peyote ceremony tonight. No. Don't. I mean, I'm a little bit unstable, so on my bad day you might get hit in the face, you know? That's my own honesty with myself, you know, and I keep my space from some people during those times. But you know, it's frustrating to see that. So if you're gonna treat it like medicine, I wholly disrespect that that fake idea that, oh, I'm here to trip balls, but I'm going to pretend like I care about the spiritual aspect. I'm here to trip balls, but I'm going to pretend like I care about all those people who are in prison for no reason. Care for real.
So good. I'm going to be a little brief because I just want to listen mostly to y'all. But what I would like to see, because we already know what we've seen, which is trash and disrespect and not, signing a goddamn contract and being like, fuck y'all. We've seen that. So, but what I would like to see on some Malcolm X shit is by any means necessary. I want my kinfolk that are my skinfolk, because back to your point, not everybody that looks like you is about your shit or has done the work to be able to be with you, walk that walk, which is a very lonely walk for my people. And my people are now everybody on this panel. No, I would like to see us, and I put a question in our list of panel questions. I was like, what does it look like to not compare whatever we build, create, do, heal for our community to what white people are doing? Like, what does it look like to really Einstein our way out of this bitch? Like really use an imagination that's not rooted in comparison or y'all collectively, or, the systems that you not knowing that you're Irish as fuck has done to you, right? Eat your potatoes, like get to work, back to your point, you know what I mean? Like, get it, y'all are just as fucked up as us. But yeah, I think that I want my kinfolk, my skinfolk, and that term goes very wide and broad. As long as you know who the fuck you are and where you come from, you could come to my table. But if you don't, good night. I'm more concerned with galvanizing the people that are about that life at this point in my life. I'm not convincing anybody to see me or to see her, to see him, to see her, to see them, to see him, nobody. I'm no longer in that work. And I feel free about that, and it feels much more spacious and like doable for me as a little baby human who's in their 30s at this point. You know what I mean? Like, whoever wants to go on the ride and wants to go to the farm and wants to touch the land and wants to shut the fuck up, let's do it together. I can't worry about the larger machinery that's underground fucking up our pathways. So I think that's what I would like to see, is whoever's about that life coming together. I'm not saying like fuck everybody else, but I just personally, I'm a little crazy too. Like, I don't have it, I'm a sweetheart, but my other side is like a really nasty fucking person. So to not give that out, I'm like, I'm just gonna focus on the love, and everybody else could just go fuck themselves. Thank you.
I don't know. I don't know, y'all. I sit with the teachers. I pray. I meditate. I ask, and I don't have anything revealed. I know that what I do have is faith. I have a very, very strong faith, because this guy, and 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 my God, this woman. Renee here, she's a boss.
Yes.
Dear God, I got to see her in action. And it's like to sit there, and this is the wheel, and just push, and it moves incrementally, but she don't get it, she don't stop. You gonna change this, bitch? We gotta change the damn law. And we're gonna change the law. And if we gotta change 50 laws, we're gonna change 50 laws. And I'm gonna ride up here every single time, and I'm gonna bring my crew, and I'm gonna look your ass in the face and tell you no. Yes. That's why I have faith it's gonna be okay. Because that's all Spirit gives me. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. It's all gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay. And then I look at these people. We're gonna be okay.
Could you repeat the question? Sorry. I was just listening so deeply, everyone. I'm sorry.
Honestly, the question's kind of morphed in all honesty.
Word.
Honestly, what I want to see is how can we, even through our colonial frameworks, because I really like how we're mentioning most of all, BIPOC can hold colonial frameworks. And what I mean by colonial frameworks is generally just being a colonizer, that predatory way of looking at things. How can we dismantle that in our communities to address psychedelic medicines now for protecting community? Healing and protecting community.
That's an awesome question. I think, or what I feel is like one of the things at the root of that question is pain, and for everyone in the room, if you want to get to know everyone better, go through your own pain. It's the fastest way. Like in my path with medicine, I guess the entry was really light, and then it was just a lot of pain. And it's been a lot of pain because I want to see my family heal. I'm willing to endure all of this African trauma. Yeah. I'm also willing to endure trauma from my brothers and sisters and trauma from my brothers and sisters. But pain is a really fast way, and facing your fear is a really, really, really fast way. Especially if you have fears about people of color. It's a really fast way to just face the fear, or homeless people, just face the fear, right now. I think that is really important. And then I guess how I would respond is I have a lot of faith just like, you do, and I see a future that is very open and two worlds that are going to have to coexist with each other, and that is the capitalist paradigm and the reawakening of people who are more earth-centered and cosmic-centered, and it has to be done without a war. And I see it in Peru, and I see it with like all of my beautiful brothers who like cry in front of me because we're walking the same path where we have to work with the people every day who put our cultures in the ground for good. And we have to greet them, and we have to embrace them, and we have to love them, because we know if we don't do that, that what's going to happen to our like little cousins and brothers is they're going to go back in the ground for good too. And I think that is really important. There are, to me, I see two cultures that are emerging. I don't hold one as more inherently valuable than the other, but I would say that one has the power on a bad day to genocide the other. And to just say, it's totally over. And I think that's what has to be brought into this new context, because the difference between the 60s and now is that we're at a stage where capitalism has advanced to a very high and very fast degree. Where even when I communicate with my like younger cousins or siblings, there's been such a deep war on their mind. They cannot speak that well to my older cousins because they never got familiar with our way of doing things before they got familiar with the way of the world. And I think that's the same with psychedelics, where there's like a familiarity and a relation that has to be established before you try to see how much money you can make, before you can see how many people you can heal. The best, healers have done a lot of their own work. So when they come, there's actually a lot of space for them to do work with other people without getting so involved, in the mix. But on the flip of it is really like the pasajero, or the person who's coming to the sit or the circle, who also realizes that it's their responsibility to do the work, to collaborate with the healer, because we're all one, right? So if you come with your best, it makes it easier for reach my best. That's a part of it. So often, a lot of people come with the Western model, which is like, oh my God, heal me. Oh my God, don't tell me what to do. Oh my God, I know you've been working, but I saw a documentary this weekend. You know, and it's so like, if we view plants, for example, as school, and you come to school and you're not prepared for class, not only in some cases will you get your ass handed to you, you will help everyone else get their asses handed to them because you stop the work. Where racism starts, the work stops. Where sexism starts, the work stops. And I've really seen a lot of my sisters suffer of all different backgrounds because somebody is stopping the work because they don't want to admit that they're wrong and that they have work to do. And that was the cultural baggage, you know, that they bought in. Every one of us who does this work has a cultural suitcase. We're just the people who everyone sees. But everybody comes in with their cultural suitcase, and when we're ready to do the work, the suitcase gets unpacked and maybe we leave some items. But when we're not ready to do the work, instead of leaving one suitcase, the next time we come back with 2 suitcases. We say, oh, Spirit, help me. And it's like, I want you to empty your suitcase. I said, no, oh, Spirit, help me again. I don't anything but the suitcase, anything but the suitcase. And like, I have my suitcase, I have my cultural patterns. A lot of my suitcase is getting empty. A lot of my life is changing. And then I see a whole new layer of suitcase, and then it's time to go in there and dig out some more. Like, I think it's often, we're looking for psychedelics to save, and there are so many people out there who prey on that, who prey on an open mind. And they abuse and they fuck up people's work that in some cases can take them years to recover. I've seen this a lot with ayahuasca in ways that's like really sad for me, because they're people that I love and they were misled and they were abused. Like, I think it's so important to, without any medicine at all, to develop your own sense of personal integrity and practice it. It's not like the 10 Commandments. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to practice and evaluate. No one's judging you but yourself. And no one can take action but yourself. The power of your action can change the entire universe. And I actually think we're on a really, 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 really awesome and beautiful trajectory. But if we are the only people who struggle, it will just take much longer. Everyone is a child of Mother Earth. Everyone's got to get in there and struggle. And all the resistance we face and all the trauma we have and all the things that hook us are the things that only we can learn how to unhook ourselves, from. And learning to care for different, people. I have a history of drug abuse in my family. I never did drugs or anything like that. I took on that healing work because I know that that drug abuse was a symptom of my family growing up in New York City and them not having access to the medicine. So that's how they self-medicated. And it was a lot of pain for me to do that work, and it's like finding different ways for me to do work where I can lighten somebody else's load, even though I have a lot on my load. And if I'm lightening someone else's load, and I feel like this is the really challenging part about the work, there's a risk that I will get hurt. And there's a risk when everyone, who anyone works with goes to heal you, there's a risk that they will get hurt. You have to share that risk with them by being a person of integrity in your own way, by being true to yourself in your own way, by not waiting for anyone to give the answer, but finding your own answer in your heart, in your own way. If you can respect your way and you can appreciate your way, you will find it easier to respect the way and appreciate the way of other people. But if the internet leads this movement and experts lead this movement and people who have done 2 or 3 weeks worth of work and now have the answer for everyone lead this movement, we're all in trouble. And to be honest, those are the people who have most access to open minds, because most of us are probably so in the trenches that it's not like we have a huge satellite to do that. Like, I don't have Graham Hancock's following. You know, that's it. And then like, and the other thing I'd say is just learning the cultural context. And Graham Hancock touches on that, where there are Westerners saying that they know our culture better than we do.
Yes, a lot. Right.
And then there are other people who are taking their word for it, because in the Western model, there's citation and there's measurement and they have videos. And for me, and I'm not sure about everyone here, but I assume it's true, it's like oral tradition. Like, it's received and you have memorized it, and there isn't like a Wikipedia to say like, you know, this source and da-da-da-da. And like, I think that that's really important, is like respecting the cultural context in which these medicines like emerge out of. In Peru, I have learned so much from their culture just by being a student. I know that Peru's real name was Tahuantinsuyo, and there were 4 Suyos, and that they have a whole different cultural cosmovision than what is advertised to us in the West. But again, it comes down to, can we give up Graham Hancock, and can we do the work to find the people and to really learn? And to not have other people force feed it to us to what we think it's going to be. I know that you all have a really special journey, and I'm like honored to be in the room with you. And I hope you do not give away your journey or sell your journey to someone who's pretending to be something that they're not.
One quick thought, Renee, real quick. I asked my son this question. He's 14. His answer: teach them.
Oh, that was like today. Oh, this afternoon.
Yeah.
I hope that this panel and many more can be a catalyst to the multi-dimensional contexts of cultural sensitivity, our accountability to all of our ancestors, good and bad, and our accountability to future generations as we bridge that now too. Because all of us are still, we do have the right to heal through medicines, but if you understand these contexts, you also understand your responsibility also in that healing towards yourself and that healing towards everything that you use, all those medicines. So I hope that this amazing panel, I'm so grateful for all of you, you're able to just see a glimpse of that type of context going forward, even in yourselves too, about that type of responsibility. It's what we coin now, yes, as restorative justice. It's legitimately a form of authentic justice. And I actually want to leave you with the words of Alicia Cardenas. She taught me the medicines here. She was shot at Soul Tribe in December 27th, by a white supremacist. And she actually knew him really well. They were friends actually before that. And she had taught him actually some things too, even in tattoo, in that space too. She embraced all backgrounds. One of the first things I asked her was, how do we let in white people in our spaces? And she goes, I need you to remember this. You might be 2 or 3 generations removed. They're 12 to 13 generations removed. And if you do not give them some access to reconnect to their indigeneity, how are you ever going to really heal too? And then I asked her, well, what about those with privilege then? Because we used to talk for hours. She did all of my tattoos. And I asked her, what about privilege then? She goes, there are 2 things that you can do with privilege. And I can forward you this video. She was an amazing, powerful woman. One is, yes, help other people. That is what you should do. It's great. But most of all, move with authentic integrity. I so appreciate you for saying that. English does not truly dispel what integrity really means in that space, but it's being authentically true to yourself in everything that you do and the interactions that you do with others, to follow through on what you say, on that action. And yes, movement is sacred, or I wouldn't even be a danzante. So to me, that type of movement is sacred. And sometimes all we can offer in this type of space is a panel of knowledge to even understand these multidimensional sacred contexts. So I ask that you move with your privilege. I ask that you know where to relinquish it truly in that type of sacred way to connect again to each other, so that healing can happen where we're not dependent on just one medicine, whether it's psychedelics, but we can rebalance all the medicines as living with us too. So I'm assuming now we could take questions really quick for probably 5 minutes, if that's okay. 2 minutes for questions? Okay.
Quick answers.
So quick answers, no long-winded.
Spitfire.
Does anybody have a question, any brave soul?
Or a feeling.
Or feeling,
You know, could be anything.
Please. You can come up or you can shout.
I'll shout. I'll sit and shout. First of all, thank you so much, all of you. I am an anthropologist by training, and I've been like reading a lot of theory for years and years and years, and that's how I kind of came into this work. And I just have a question about like power and capitalism and white supremacy, like, and how, just wondering, you know, a lot of theorists talk about how it like moves through bodies, and I'm wondering, do you think that there's like a spirit to that? Like, how do you all conceptualize capitalism and the way it moves through?
Just capitalism? Or like
The whole deal. Like I think I'm kind of conceptual. This like paradigm. Like, are we in it? Is it like a spirit moving through? Is it like the water? Like,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I feel like all of us could answer that, but real quick, my answer is yes. It's absolutely spirit. I personally have a hard time in white spaces right now. Thankfully, because of y'all, I feel like a fucking, what is it? Like the Transformers? I'm like, it feels great. But it's hard for me because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you know that, again, you eat potatoes, that you were French, that you were, you know, Basque back in the day. I don't know that you know that. So to me, it's a weird spirit exchange. So I have a barrier up, you know? That's my work. I still have to do some more work. But it doesn't feel great, you know? Capitalism is a spirit. That's a fucked up spirit. Again, I still pay taxes. I still have to do all this fucking bullshit. It's a shitty spirit that I'm like trying to be in a better relationship with myself. So yeah, that's a little bit, but great question.
And it's dying. It's dying. Look
Like,
around.
one of the things I have heard older people talk about it is that it is part of a sickness. It's associated with like greed, right? It's pretty obvious that it's associated with greed, and then there are old stories about people where that is a true sickness of the mind that various tribes have treated in different ways, you know, through medicines like the psychedelics that we're talking about, right? Through medicines like the food that we nourish each other with. We do have old stories that say that the problem of predatory consumption can be healed. It was something that was treated within the community, but yeah, it's been told as a story that white people just have too much of it or something, right? So the old way of thinking about it was, you know, be careful because they're gonna come and they're gonna take things, and they're not even gonna know why they want it, right? It's like, why did you want it? You know, so the capitalism is that need to feed just to have it. Do you need to produce $100,000 worth of whatever every 5 minutes? And right now you're broken down, so now you need to get on every one of your workers and be like, hey, I'm losing $100,000 every 5 minutes. To do what? To do what, right? So yeah, then that sounds sick, right? It sounds like a sickness. Maybe we treat it like one.
Like a parasite.
I agree. I've been told that it's a form of spiritual warfare, and the best way to describe it in old tales was a snake eating itself. So that's how the mindset is that overconsumption even when you're full. And why? Why do you feel that need to not have any form of self-regulation, of that emotional intelligence, of that spiritual connectivity? Those types of forms of restorative nature not only kill the snake and kill itself, but it's insanity. And in some aspects, even in political realms, before I go and consult a lot of things, even with the governor, they tied us at a signing today, was I go to my elders first, and they mention it. Don't ever forget, mija. This is still a form of spiritual warfare. You need to decide whether you're going to be a life giver in that space or be of the same sickness too. So it's a decision, really seeing it once you do see it for what it is. If that helped.
I think no, absolutely. Clap for it. Yeah, definitely. Even more. I think in a very Buddhist context, it could be described as a hungry ghost, right? You just keep feeding this ghost, or very parasitic, but I guess the way that, I see it from my studies is a lot of it lies in the unconscious and in people's belief system. And most of our relationship to capitalism is formed around trauma. For people of European descent, most who came over during the colonizing waves were people who were abused by, Rome and the British and all that, and then a lot of people coming over because of famine or religious persecution. And the buy-in to this system was buying into certain systems of oppression, which has always kept us on the bottom. But really, it was keeping lots of different culture groups on the bottom until whiteness was homogenized as a nationalistic idea. And so, I guess for me, it's important to look at it as like a hungry ghost. Like, how much does this parasite, need to eat? And where does this parasite live in me? Yeah, where does this parasite live in me? I found it in myself.
Well said, bro.
It's after 9 o'clock. Yeah.
If anybody wants to have a quick question, or we can mingle right after.
How do y'all feel about the Natural Medicine Health Act?
Oh, the what question?
The what?
The Natural Medicine Health Act.
I don't feel it goes far enough for indigenous provisions for the protections that have already been established, with the same type of equity analysis for future generations and that access to medicine with the context of environmental cumulative impacts. Legitimately, the medicines, like on the frontera right now, there's fungus that are already eating the medicine. There's many people that have been predatory, and there's no protective provisions. So until we kind of move with that context of, again, protection of knowing where there's already been predatory behaviors, the data that supports it, and incorporating that before that type of legislation is introduced, you're going to mimic the same institution again. The status quo is going to go back to the status quo, and we need to recognize that. That's why those protections have to be extraordinary, because they weren't existent for the predatory nature of it. So that's kind of been my perspective of this one.
Thank you. I just want to recognize the time and say thank you to all of you, Renee, for moderating, and to all of our panelists. Could we just give a nice...
Shoshana, thank you for bringing us all together too, by the way. I thank every one of you to move gently with yourselves. This is colonization we're taking on, and I'm truly grateful for just your context and medicine that you bring. So, thank you.
What's your grandma's?
That is nice.